Steve Hathaway and Andrew Buttle, a pair of friends who routinely go diving together, described the creature as being hollow, almost as if it were a huge
จมูก
wind
ย่าง
sock. As the video footage they recorded plays, the sea worm can be seen changing shape and pulsating, perhaps responding to the proximity of its human visitors. Without examining the creature firsthand, it's hard for scientists to say what it is or what it might be, but they believe it could be a parasome, a creature that's not one single entity but a composite of millions of tiny organisms that feed on plankton. When the organisms come together, they create a mass of bioluminescent material that can look like this. If the scientists are right, this isn't a worm at all. It's a colony ship. The landscape of our planet hasn't always looked the same. There are parts of the land that were once underwater, and there are also areas deep underwater that were once part of the land. That explains why there's a 60,000-year-old forest at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Alabama, which was discovered by scientists in April 2020. The forest, which is made up of cypress trees, was buried under sediment over many years, then covered by rising sea levels. They probably remained buried until Hurricane Katrina tore through the area in the 21st century.
There is harmony
In two, one captures the essence of time.
forever preserved in golden spirit,
When we imagine space,
moving over the land in a whisper,
we are masters of our crafts.
but apprentices of nature.
So we travel gently on roads to innovation and sustainability.
And when
When
two
two come together,
we can create beauty without harming what is beautiful,
the McAllen and Bentley.
on an extraordinary journey into the future.
The area in the 21st century and disturbed the sediment they were hiding beneath. After discovering the
ที่บ้าน
forest,
มี
the
คน
team
หู
of
หนวก
divers
จ้ะ
managed to
เขาก็เลย
retrieve pieces of
เปิด
the
เสียง
ancient
ดัง
trees
ดังเนาะ
and found that they still had bark attached to their exterior, and the interior of the wood still had its original colors. Usually, trees would rot away after such a long period underwater, but the thick layers of sediment prevented oxygen from reaching the fallen trees and preserved them. Even more excitingly, there are ancient organisms trapped inside the trees, which scientists are still studying today. During 2016, an exploratory dig was commissioned at a site
เห็
in
นข่าวเมืองไทย
Buckinghamshire,
แล้วส
England,
ลดนะ
ahead
พี่
of
น้
the
องเนาะ
planned construction of new houses in the area. During the excavation, an ancient Roman well was discovered, and at the bottom of the watery pit, a basket of 3 chicken eggs that had lain undisturbed for around 1,700 years. Unfortunately, one of the eggs was broken as archaeologists attempted to bring it back to the surface and caused a stench so putrid that the attempt had to be abandoned for several hours. It's likely that neither the eggs nor the basket would have survived if they'd been left on dry land, but the waterlogged pit of the well has protected them from the worst effects of aging. Also found under the water were shoes, tools, and Roman coins. That's led some experts to believe this might have been a wishing well of some kind into which Romans threw objects in the hope of receiving good fortune. Eggs were associated with birth and fertility, so whoever left the basket here may have been hoping to start a family. Chuck Lagoon, also known as Truck Atoll, is a natural coral harbor in the Central Pacific area with an interesting history. During the Second World War, it functioned as a major Japanese naval base and became the focus of an American attack during Operation Hailstone. It's also a focal point of archaeological dives and has been visited by the great French explorer Jacques Cousteau. His 1971 visit to the site resulted in the discovery of a whole fleet of wrecked ships in various states of disrepair, which have gone on to become known as the Ghost Fleet of Truck Lagoon. The especially clear waters of the lagoon allow for a crystal clear view of the shattered boats, many of which still carried the cargo of fighter planes, bulldozers, tanks,
กิน
mines,
เสร็จ
or
แล้ว
other
ค่อยคุยกัน
weaponry,
เนาะ
along with personal effects and remains of their lost crews. As fascinating an area as it's become to visit scuba divers, the wrecks will eventually have to be cleaned up. The ships are decaying, and when the hulls breach, they'll spill oil into the surrounding area. That would be an environmental catastrophe and one which ought to be avoided.
อร่อยพี่น้องเอ้ย
The Apollo 11 mission is famous for being the venture into space that put human beings on the moon. In the process of reaching for the stars, though, NASA deposited quite a lot of trash into the ocean, including some F1 rocket engines. In 2013, the forgotten engines were finally hauled back out of the sea in a mission paid for by Jeff Bezos, the founder and owner of Amazon. 5 engines like these would be used in the first stage of the Saturn V rocket that launched the Apollo 11 astronauts into space, with each engine standing almost 20 feet tall and weighing more than 18,000 pounds. Although Bezos didn't specify exactly where his team had found the engines, it's known that they were somewhere on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. It took 3 weeks for the team to find the engines, which were finally located at a depth of nearly 3 miles below the water's surface. Although the team brought as much equipment back to dry land as possible, they were forced to leave quite a lot of it behind, including the Saturn V stage structure, which stands out in some of the eerie undersea photos taken by Jeff's robot divers.
อันนั้นไม่เผ็ด
We won't pretend to know everything about what fish might get up to when we're not watching, but we do know for sure there's an underwater strip club complete with a dancing pole underwater off the coast of Eilat in Israel. This isn't part of the sunken kingdom, though. The strip club, formerly known as Nympha's Show Bar, was deliberately built as an underwater attraction, but the business failed and the premises were abandoned. Since all the human revelers have stopped visiting, tropical fish have made the place their own. Diver and photographer Gil Koplovitz rediscovered the Forgotten Club in 2013 and took most of the pictures you see here. Back when the club was open, it was accessed through a door at street level, which took paying visitors across a 230-foot-long bridge and then down a staircase below the water. It appears that the empty club is well preserved. The chrome interior is still shiny. The chairs and tables are still in place. There's even a bottle of water on one of the tables that's been left as if someone eventually intended to come back to it. All of us are familiar with the sight of enormous factory chimneys in towns and cities that belch smoke into the sky. But how many of you knew that the same thing also happened as a natural occurrence underwater? The phenomenon is known as a black smoker, and the biggest one ever seen was documented off the coast of Costa Rica in 2007, 8,500 feet below sea level. Positioned on a volcanic ridge, this all-natural mineral chimney emits hot, dark water that looks exactly like thick, dark smoke. The old shipping vessel was built in the Netherlands in 1951 and went about perfectly legitimate shipping duties for many years. But by 1984, she was aging and had passed into the hands of drug dealers.
อะไรหนูหาละ
She was boarded by police while in the port of Bonaire and found to contain a... Such is her popularity that even after almost 40 years in the water, she's still considered to be one of the most attractive wreck diving attractions in all of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
The correct name for the incredible human-made art exhibit under the waters of Key Biscayne in Florida, USA, is the Neptune Memorial Reef.
no
In execution, it's more like an underwater city of the dead. But that doesn't mean it's
เสี
a
ยใจ
morbid
กับครอบ
place.
ครัวน้องน้องพรด้วยนะคะ
The exhibits that have been positioned on the seabed have been deliberately treated to make them look ancient. But in reality, they were created and arranged by artist Tim Randall in 2007.
อย่าลืมเข้ามากดไลค์กดแชร์กด Subscribe ให้น้องด้วยเด้อสวัสดีจ้า
This is a